Vincent, hello.
Hi.
How
Hi, how
are
you
you?
doing? Good. I'm well, thank you. Thank you.
Great.
I
Yeah,
feel like
thanks
I'm
so
really
much for.
big in this picture.
I know. I was just adjusting as well. I was like, I think I'm a little too close, but thanks so much for joining us. I'm so glad you could do this, and we could talk to all the fans here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this where I want to start, because you had already been on other soaps before joining All My Children, Guiding Light,
Right.
and Santa Barbara. Did you were you asked to audition for All My Children, or was it just kind of they had this role ready and were like, Vincent is our guy?
No, actually, I did not audition. The timing was kind of perfect. I was going back east for my daughter Aria's baptism, and my manager contacted me and said, "You're going to be back east. All my children, they want to meet with you about a role that they're considering bringing you on for." And it was the same. I was there for the Sunday for baptism. That I had an appointment the next day on Monday. I was going to leave on Monday, and I said, "All right, I'll just extend my trip and I'll go in and meet with them." And I met with Judy Wilson and Jean Daddario Burke, the executive producers, and we just had a really nice sit down. We talked about the role for about half an hour or so. And at the end of it, they just offered the role to me. I didn't audition, I didn't read for it or anything. And it was only supposed to be for 3 months. And
Right.
it turned into a 12-year, 13-year role, basically, for me. So, which was great. It
That
was
is
actually,
wild. Yeah, that's
yeah,
so crazy. You hear that happen a lot. Someone goes on just for a little guest stint or a very small arc, and it becomes so much bigger. Do you know,
yeah.
was that a result of like fan reaction to the character, or was it just they realized, oh, we have a lot more we can kind of play with here?
Yeah, it definitely there was a fan reaction to it, but everyone could see the writers, the network, and the executive producer. Everybody could see the potential in the character. It was a great character from the beginning. Before the 3 months were up, they offered me a 3-year contract, and I wasn't able to take it right away. I had to go back to Los Angeles, so I turned them down actually. And it was 5 months later that Judy Wilson contacted me, the casting director, and she said, "How can we make this work?" And I made it work from that point on. It's a long story, which I won't go into right now, but it really was pretty fortuitous, the whole thing, and it was just like, heaven and earth was moved to make it happen.
Wow.
So I was really grateful for that because I love the character. But the truth is, and this is what, after several months of doing the character, I did go to Jean Burke and I did go to Angela Shapiro, who was head of the network at the time, whom I loved. She was fantastic. I knew her for years before because she was the editor of one of the soap magazines.
Hmm.
And I talked to them about, I was a little concerned because my character had no history with anybody on the show except for Allie, which was the character that I went there to go and try and win back.
Hmm.
And after that story with Gone was done, I just felt that he could come across as just basically a nuisance, an annoyance to the other characters because you didn't have any history of who he was or why he
Hmm.
was the way that he was. So I asked them if they could please bring on somebody that really knew David thoroughly, inside and out, so that they could hopefully start to inform the audience as to who he really is and why he is the person he is. And that's when they brought on Marge Doucet to be my mother, play Vanessa, she plays psychotic like nobody else. She was
Hmm.
brilliant at it. And it really did bring that into the audience to give them a history of David and even some empathy for him as the person he was. So I was really excited about that. That was a real turning point for my character.
Yeah, that certainly helped inform those kind of villainous ways, I suppose.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah, I mean,
definitely. Yeah.
this guy David is certainly regarded as one of the best daytime villains. I mean, I guess that's something to stand on, right?
Yeah, very much so. And I find it as I do find it like very rewarding when people would take David's side over some of the
Mm,
nefarious things that he would do to the not so
yeah.
good people of Pine Valley. David saw them as a bunch of hypocrites, frankly,
Mm,
because a lot of them had done certain things that I was doing, but when I did, it was like, oh my gosh, how could you do something like that? But the good thing about David was that he was a world-renowned cardiologist and that he did have the ability to save lives. So that was the good side, the flip side of his nefarious characteristics.
right, right.
And it was always kind of ironic that no matter what was going on and how much people hated him in Pine Valley, whenever somebody in their family was sick, they came running to David Hayward.
Hmm.
Even had me taken out of jail at one point to perform a heart surgery on one of the daughters of one of the characters. I think it was
Right.
Brooke.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, talking about some of the nefarious acts. I mean, yeah, the guy could save people. He also knew how to poison people. Wasn't that really in your first original arc? You poisoned David Canary's Adam Chandler, all to kind of frame Jake Martin, but then knew how to save Adam in the process.
That's right, I did. That was the first thing, that first time you saw how the lengths to which David Hayward would go to try and win.
Mhm.
And David Canary, Adam, was in the hospital, and I can't remember, I think it was norepinephrine or something like that, that David had induced him with an overdose of that drug, and had attributed to Jake, who was Michael Lowry at the time, that he had medicated him,
Mhm.
over medicated him, and then I ran in and gave him the proper dosage of something to like bring it down, and I saved his life. So I looked like the savior, and he looked like he had, potentially malpractice suit against him.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's how the character kind of started, and then the audience started to see this guy could be dangerous.
Mhm.
So pretty cool.
A slight tangent, but a very important question on the topic of David Canary, who of course passed several years ago, but it's just an icon to the show. What are your favorite memories of working with David?
I have so many memories of David. Let me just say this first. I've worked on 6 different shows. Okay, I've worked with a lot of actors in this medium. And I've always loved that on All My Children, the people that were there that had the capacity and even the right to act like divas or divos, David Canary certainly being one of them. The complete opposite was true, that David was one of the most gracious people that you could ever work with. He was utterly professional. I held him in the highest esteem when I worked with him, great respect. My first time I ever worked with him, we worked together for 5 hours in the same set in the Chandler living room. He was playing both characters, David and Stuart.
Yeah.
So we were doing several episodes of the scenes in it, so that's why it was so long. So I was doing the same scene over and over again for both characters, and with a stand-in when he was Adam and a stand-in when he was Stuart. And I swear, after 5 hours of working with him, that was when I was only supposed to be on the show for 3 months, and I felt like it was sort of like All My Children, a fantasy camp, get to work with the actors and then go,
Mm-hmm.
But working with David, I walked out there, felt like I had just witnessed a master class. He was absolutely brilliant, and I just was like, I love this man. And he was so gracious and so giving, and you could approach him about anything. He loved running lines. He was just, I never saw him once, ever, lose his temper over anything in all the years that I worked with him. He was just really the consummate professional and actor and human being. He was just a beautiful man, salt of the earth. Absolutely.
Yeah. We certainly have heard that a lot from your co-stars. Just that same
Sure.
kind of sentiment, and also about John Callahan. About he had the big laugh. Was always smiling and having fun.
He always was. He was always joking around, and he was always up on set 10 minutes late because he was downstairs, he was getting himself all prim and proper. He was, doing his thing. So John, he liked to joke around on set. And, obviously, rest in peace, John. I'm sorry for him, and certainly for Kaya and for Eva. It's a terrible loss, especially so young. I had worked with John. Lastly, at the time I worked with him was actually in Palm Springs, and I did a play reading with him in Palm Springs at a theater there. There were several other actors as well, Christian LeBlanc, a bunch of other people that we had done. And that was the last time that I worked with John. I think I saw him one time since then. That was about, I don't know, that was several years ago. So,
yeah. Well, let's pivot a bit. I want to go back to David, and you talked about this, really getting to explore more with the character. When you won the Emmy in 2009, you thanked a specific writer. I believe it's Chuck Pratt.
Yes, Chuck Pratt.
Tell me more about what it was that he was able to zero in on, and what made you really just love David and getting to play him.
I had left the show. I was off the show in 2006 for 2 years. I literally left the show, and 2 weeks later I was brought on to Young and the Restless to play David Chow. And the day that I finished my contract on Young and the Restless, that same day I left the studio and I got a voice message on my phone from Chuck Pratt. And he was calling because he had just taken over the head writer position over on All My Children. And he left me a message saying, I want you back on the show. We need your character. Come on back. He said, let me help you win an Emmy. I've got a great story for you. That's what he said to me. And I was like, wow, that's intriguing. How can I not at least pursue this and explore the possibility? So I went to New York and I had to sit down with him, and he shared his story with me of bringing me back onto the show. And I thought, I love it. I love this, the whole thing. This is a great story. And it was right towards the end of the year. So I came back, I think I was back in November of that year, finished the story, got into the story, and it was like 4 months into the year. It was like April or May, or no, actually it was later. That's right. It was, I think it was August when we did it. But all of a sudden I won the Emmy from that storyline. And it really was all my scenes from that storyline that he had written for me. So of course I had to thank him, and I thought it was rather prescient of him to say such a thing. So it's really funny. You know, it's interesting because Judy Wilson, who she was the casting director on the show, whom I love, I adore her. She was similar in that regard. When I left the show after those 3 months, and I turned them down on the contract, she had invited me to go to the Soap Opera Digest Awards after that. And I went to the awards, and we were sitting next to each other, and during the category of best villain or something, I think that's what it was, I think it's what I went for, she leans over, she says, next year that's going to be you. And I'm like, Judy, I'm not on the show. She said, next year that's going to be you. The next year I won that category. And it was Judy Wilson had predicted, and I walked into her office after. I said, are you kidding me? You literally said this to me, and I wasn't even on the show at the time. So she's magical. I love her. I love her.
Yeah, I was going to say, what else does she know? Does she know lottery numbers? Or
I know. I should get in touch with her. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that storyline. I definitely want to get into some fan questions here. Aaron PB 1976 asked, what was your favorite storyline on All My Children? You definitely had some doozies. I mean, you found out you had a love child. Your son died. You were shot.
My daughter died, but that's okay. But yeah, my daughter died. Her
daughter died.
With Vanola, Vanna. I did have so many wonderful stories. I have definitely the introduction of Vanessa into the show. Those first scenes that I had with her, where she's having a heart attack in the parking lot, and Erica sees me, calls me over, and the audience doesn't know what my relationship is to this woman, and I just look at her like, basically, die, bitch. You know, and I just step over her. I literally walk over and walk away, and Erica's like, oh, what are you doing? That storyline was great because of the reason that I said. It was a turning point, pivotal point for my character where the audience is concerned. I also love the storyline with Erica, where she had me locked down in her basement with my hand in a vice for like 2 weeks. And then the whole story comes out about my father's suicide and how my mother had egged him on to put a gun to his head and blow his brains out, and how I, as an 11-year-old boy, watched this and ran to him, and he bled out of my arms. Because that also informed the audience as to why I was a doctor, okay? That from that point on, I was committed to fight death. Everybody that I saved, it was my way of trying to bring my father back. And it just gives a more human element to a character when you have backstory like that. Yeah. But the most fun storyline I ever had was, without question, Libidazone. The Libidazone story, where because he dabbled in pharmaceutical research and he came up with this drug, Libidazone, that removed all your inhibitions, okay? And it could be whatever your desires are. It could be sexual. It could be like where Opal was concerned. She was starving, so she was like eating food off the floor. She couldn't eat enough. And it was just the fact that David, by accident, dropped a flask of Libidazone into a punch bowl at a party, and everybody was induced with it. And that sort of set off a storyline that went on for a whole year, where the ramifications of that night, the interactions that took place between everybody, affected everybody on a certain level, till David was finally, brought up on charges for it. But so that was a great story.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned Erica Kane and the great Susan Lucci. I mean, wow, the arc, the roller coaster that you went on with Susan. Tell me about that. I mean, because at one point, David and Erica were an item. He never was one of the many husbands, though.
Yes, I know. And honestly, I feel like I dodged a bullet there, because usually, unless you were Jack, Anybody who married Erica, it seemed like after they divorced, they were kind of killed off. And I was like, oh, well, probably good that I didn't marry her. Nothing against Susan, but it seemed like that was the pattern that took place there. So, but I loved working with Susan, and very much the same way with David Canary. Susan is a consummate professional. We had a wonderful working relationship with each other, great connection with each other. And it was an interesting storyline, you know, because it started with her getting her face ripped off, and you know, during a snowstorm where we're driving in a snowstorm and we get struck by a truck that was in front of us, and then me helping nursing her back to good health. But I believe the storyline before that's happened was when she had me in the basement. So it was a growing, developing relationship of me caring for her when I felt responsible for what had happened to her face, and that was our Phantom of the Opera stage period, when Susan was walking around with half a mask on her face. And then, amusingly so, we went to Brazil to a doctor I know named Dr. Faxinella to refashion her face. It was kind of funny. That's an interesting name for a plastic surgeon, Dr. Faxinella. So, yeah, so that's, but the characters, the storyline, we played really well together. It was for about a year and a half, I believe our characters were together, and we were talking about marriage, and then we broke it off. But it was really a wonderful period of time when I worked on the show with Susan. I loved working with her.
You mentioned, right, it was her back, and then the irony, if I'm not mistaken, she shot you in the back later, right?
I don't remember. I really don't.
Right, was it Erica who shot? Yeah, I feel like, I don't know. I have vague memories of when David
I don't
shot
remember.
Back,
Yeah, I don't remember. There were so many storylines. I don't remember if she ever shot me. I don't remember that. That I don't.
David was
better than I do.
Right, David was in a coma for a very short time.
Yeah, David was in a coma for a while.
Yeah.
That had something to do with, I believe, the setting up of Greenleaf for murder at one point. I remember that too. I don't know. Yeah, I was in a coma, and those were really, people would think, oh, that's so great. You get to go to work and lay down and close your eyes for hours while people, you know, have their monologue over you. That wasn't very fun because, honestly, I kept falling asleep. I'd literally be falling asleep. But there was one time where they had to stop because they heard me like just snoring a little bit, just a little bit. And I had to wake up. And I always felt that no matter how much sleep I got the night before work, and I would go and do that, when I started falling asleep on set, I would wake up and I would be like in a fog all day long. Like it was not fun. And I was like ready to be over with it. You know, I was done.
Sure. Is it because you've been on so many shows, and I'm just kind of thinking as you're, thinking about getting shot in the coma, is it ever difficult for you to remember which storylines went with which characters and which shows you were on? Or do you have a pretty good catalog of that?
No, I don't have a pretty good catalog of it. I'm constantly reminded of storylines and scenes that I've done from YouTube when people post them, especially the older scenes, from Guiding Light and Blue Jack and Nick McHenry. And whenever I see, there are so many times I see scenes and I have no recollection whatsoever of doing those scenes. Don't remember the context of the scenes. I've done so many scenes in that medium, and I'm grateful for that, but I just can't remember all of them. There's too many to hold on to in the annals of my life's memories, that's for sure.
I'm sure, yeah. Certainly a fan question here from Cat MIG, Catmig. Tell us more about the Leo David dynamic and the brotherly relationship there with the great Josh Duhamel.
Yeah, Josh again was fantastic. From the first day that he came on that show, he just hit it. And honestly, it's kind of interesting because whenever there was a character that was being brought on that was directly related to my storyline, and I knew that they were in the audition process, and when they got to the time where they started putting them on tape, screen testing them, I would go down to Judy Wilson that day after they finished, and I would ask her, who do you think, how do you feel? And she would always let me watch the tape of the auditions. And the same thing with Marge Lucet. And so I went downstairs and spoke with her and saw the tape with Josh on it and all the other actors. And I said to her right away, I said, there's no competition here. He's definitely the one. He just killed it. His audition was perfect, spot on. He brought nuances to the story, to the characters where the other actors did not. And it was really beautiful to see that. And Josh was wonderful right from the first day. And actually, I think it was the first day Elizabeth Banks came on the show, but it was just a small one-day role that she did as a waitress in the scene with Josh. And she wasn't the Elizabeth Banks that everybody knows today. She was a beginning actress. And she even stood out in that. She was just playing a waitress. I thought she was beautiful, and was like, wow, she's really good, this girl, you know? But Josh, it was a great, the relationship between the two characters were wonderful. At first, I didn't even know that I had a half brother, you know, given Vanessa and her, she's kind of sneaky and all this stuff going on with her. But once I accepted that he was my brother, we accepted each other. We were very loving with each other, very supportive. And, you know, I guided him, he guided me at times, and he certainly chastised me about certain things at times. But he was a great sounding board. The characters were great sounding boards to one another, you know, and I loved it. I loved working with Josh. He was great.
Yeah. I'm seeing some questions pop up through here live, and we already had one ready to go from Trish AD663. I think it would be so great if General Hospital cashier was Dr. David Hayward. Would you consider doing that? Everyone would love it. And I'm seeing a lot of people here saying, would you cross over?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, even the opportunity to work with Finola again with these characters, because I love the characters, and we had a really great dynamic together. And I certainly could see that it would be an easy transition, given the fact that he was a world-renowned cardiologist. Let's not forget that. And it is a general hospital. It's a show about a hospital surrounding a hospital. And we have our history, you know, our characters have our history together with the death of Leora and, you know, everything, the death of Leo and all that stuff can be brought into it. There's so much in that. So, yeah, I would love to. If they wanted to bring me on, I would certainly consider it without question.
All right, we put that out into the universe. Let's see what happens. Sure. Here's another fan question from ATL Computer Man. Sounds like someone from Georgia. Vincent, let's say you're trapped in a room with all of your soap opera characters. Which of them would you befriend, and which would you try to stay away from to escape the room?
Well, I could start with, I'd probably stay away from David Chow, which the character, even the name is so funny to me. But yeah, I would stay away from David Chow from Young and the Restless because, I loved playing him because I had never played somebody with an addiction like that. He had a gambling addiction, and it was to play a character like that, a person where that addiction literally governs every aspect of the person's life. You know, their personal life, their professional life, everything. And it led him to the point where, out of desperation, he wound up starting to become a hired killer to pay off his debts. And then at the end, he tried to kill Nikki, you know, his wife, so that he could inherit her money. So that one, I'd probably stay away from him. He was a little out of control. Yeah. As I said, at least David was a world-renowned cardiologist who was able to save lives, and he did that often. And I love the fact that there were people in Pine Valley that he held their heart right in the palm of his hands.
Literally, yes.
So, David, I would definitely befriend, but I'd keep him at arm's length. Lou Jack, I loved. Lou Jack from Guiding Light. Lou Jack was my first acting ever on television. I had never done a role on television before. I had done 6 years of theater prior to that, and I got cast.
And that was early 80s.
It was 83 when I first got on the show. The end of 83. Again, November of 83 is when I first started, and it was only supposed to be for 3 days. It was a 3-day job, and again, they liked the potential of the character, liked what I brought to it. They gave me another 3 days, and before the end of the year, they offered me a contract. And that was, for me, that was foundational for my entire career in daytime and in everything, in entertainment. Because from that point on, all the shows that I've done, I've never had to audition for another job. I've always been offered them. Yeah, that was the first audition I ever had, and it was the only one I've ever done for soaps. Everyone has been basically a phone call, come in and meet with us and talk with us, or just a phone call and say we have a role we'd like you to do, which I'm grateful for. Yeah, which is great.
I'd asked you earlier about once they extended you, if that was a product of fan reaction or just seeing the potential. But on the topic of fans, when did you realize fans were latching onto this character, and would people approach you in public? We're hearing a lot from people saying, they often referred to them as the character, not as, a real life human being.
Yeah, that still happens to me today. I mean, oddly enough, after all these years, it's been almost 40 years. It's like 37 years since I did Lou Jack. People still call me Lou Jack on the street, It's amazing. That always surprises me if people remember the character that much, that he had that much of an impression upon people. And it happened with David also. My first experience of that obviously was because of Guiding Light. And it was very different for me because I had done only theater prior to that in New York and in Boston. And then all of a sudden I'd be standing at a street light in New York City at a corner waiting for the light to turn green, and somebody comes up to me and they start chastising me because of my relationship with Beth, and stay away from Beth and Philip, they belong together. I'm like, okay, I'm just going out to get coffee, give me a break. Light turns green, and I'm like gone. I was like, oh, this is weird. It was an adjustment. It was really an adjustment. And the same thing with David, though. I could certainly see from letters that people were writing. It's very different with daytime than theater. Theater there's an immediacy to it. You get a reaction immediately from the audience. You're there, you're sharing an experience right at that moment. With daytime or even with nighttime television, film, the reaction is afterwards. They're not in the soundstage with you. And this is prior to social media. So now social media has changed that to a degree where people have access to you now, and the same thing. So they respond to what they're seeing on television at that moment, and there's that sense of immediacy from the moment it airs. But it was very different back then. So it was pretty much when you started getting the letters to come in, where people were writing about it, and you would do personal appearances. We would do a lot of personal appearances all around the country at that time. And that's when you really got a sense of the power of the character, of what was happening, whether people liked the storyline or not, or the coupling between you and other characters that were there. That was great. And that, for me, that certainly informs me enough to know that I'm on the right track. And that's why I loved it. It was different. It's interesting because with Days of Our Lives, they were so far ahead. When I first started that show, they were 5-6 months ahead in taping.
Right.
So that really kind of stretched out that sense of getting any feeling for what was going on with the character. By the time my first show aired, I had already done 6 months of the character. Wow. So that was harder for me. And there were definitely times that I would go to the editor's room after doing some scenes, or like scenes a couple days before, and I would ask if I could see some of the scenes that I had done, because I wanted to see how it was playing. I needed to see how this was going off, how I looked with makeup and hair, and how the lighting from me, what was happening, how it was working. Certainly the relationship with me and the other characters, because I wasn't going to get to see it for 6 months, and I just needed to do that. So it was good. I'm happy I had that opportunity, but that was a very odd sort of outlier situation. That's not like most of the shows. So,
what was the delay, if you want to call it that? I mean, 6 months, like you said, on Days. That was a pretty untypical compared to the other shows you've been on.
No shows do that. No shows do that. Only that. Most shows are pretty much 2 weeks to a month and a half, maybe. Wow. And as they start approaching like a holiday, like a 2-week break that they do for Christmas or for the summer, they would try to get more in the can. So they may be a month to 2 months, Sure. Typically not more than 2 months. More often than not, it's between 2 weeks to 2 to 6 weeks. So
gotcha. Wow, that's wild. Shooting 6 months ahead. A couple more questions here, and some of these are certainly tying into what fans are wondering as well. But first, I want to ask you. You were there when the show was canceled. Tell me about the emotions surrounding that. What you remember from those final days. This is before, of course, going to the digital series.
Wow. Well, it was a roller coaster because of the introduction of the potential digital series as well. It was really painful for all of us, and especially because we had just moved from New York to Los Angeles less than a year and a half before, right. And it was really painful because when we arrived in Los Angeles, I mean, just understand, we had been retrenched from New York, where we were based for 40 years, okay? the crew that worked with us back then had worked with the show, some of them for a good 25, 30 years.
Wow.
And they all of a sudden were not on the show anymore. Even in that community there, to think about all the people that were working and the businesses surrounding that area would be affected because of all the years that people were going into the stores and restaurants. But for us, we were moved to Los Angeles, new set, new soundstage. It was beautiful. The sets were gorgeous. Everything was great. The story was excellent. Lorraine Broderick was writing the show at the time. They had brought her back on, and Lorraine knew the show better than anybody apart from Agnes Nixon. And she was writing such great stories. When we left New York, we were all excited that she was writing. We got to Los Angeles. The show was on a high. Everybody was excited to read every script that we got when we first went to Los Angeles. And then it was the decision of the head of the network to change head writers because he wanted a younger writing staff. And nothing against the other writers, but they didn't know the show like Lorraine. They didn't write with the same heart that Lorraine had written. And they were also being governed by that executive, the head of the network, of what stories he wanted. Sure. As a result of that, after 1 year of them writing on the show, we had lost 34% of our audience. That's what was told to us the day that we were being canceled by this executive. And I attribute that to the decision-making of that executive, without question. Everybody did, everybody does, and it's a reality. And I said this recently. I think the major change for us in this medium that I had witnessed in almost 40 years is that when I first came on the shows on Guiding Light, that was owned by Procter & Gamble, there was a very distinct line between the creatives of a show and the executives of a show, okay? The creatives were the executive producer, the head writer, and the writing staff, the directors. The executives that I call executives would be more the people on the business end of it, the people that were, were working with the network and the time slot and the advertising and, overseeing the storylines, approving the storylines. But this had changed at that time on the show because that executive decided to cross over and become and micromanage and become a creative. And he wasn't a creative. He was making one bad decision after the next. For 9 years, we would watch the show constantly being hit because of decisions that were being made. And that's a painful thing to watch when you are literally at the mercy of decisions from a hierarchy that everybody else is looking at and scratching their head and saying, why would they make this decision? What are they doing? So we're watching this happen right before our eyes after 9 years. And Susan said it perfectly on one of the talk shows that this person had inherited a very healthy show, okay? When he came on, the show was under budget all the time. We were getting out early. Everything was going great with the show. The ratings were excellent. And the same thing with One Life to Live. They were a healthy show as well. And that he had made bad decision after bad decision that all of us paid for, and the fans themselves paid the most. Because we never had closure, okay? That's the thing for me that really is upsetting. We did have Lorraine wrote a final episode, okay, for the show when we were leaving ABC. We were going to have closure then. But then Prospect Park came in and they licensed the show for online, which was great. We were all very excited about that, but it was supposed to happen like a month later after the show ended. So they changed the ending of the show and they were going to continue on. That didn't happen a month later. It turned out to be almost a year and a half later. Yeah, almost a year and a half. We finally got it up there. Ginger Smith did a brilliant job of producing it when we did the online version. The fact that she put this thing together in 2 months, getting a writing staff, had sets built, found a studio, got a production staff, brought the actors together, and all of us were sitting there walking 2 months later on these beautiful sound stages in Connecticut with these gorgeous sets that were there. Excellent story. Everybody, we were all very proud of what we were doing. But then that fell apart when the legal battle started happening between ABC and the licensing company, the company that was licensing Prospect Park. So everything was shut down. And then again, we didn't have closure. We didn't. Because we were being told for 6 months, we're coming back every 2 weeks. Oh, wait, in 2 weeks, we'll come back, we'll come back. And then at the end, around November of that year, they said, we're not coming back. And I feel bad for the audience because everything was just left hanging after 42 years, So that's basically how it came about.
Did you ever know what Lorraine's original ending was?
I did not. I did not. I know that she had written it. I know that Agnes had approved it, and she was very happy with it. Honestly, that's funny because it was last shows that I did at ABC. One of the last episodes I had done was scenes with Agnes, where she was at a hospital bed, and I loved Agnes. I loved her. She was really just this beautiful little woman that had the most gracious personality. It always amazed me when she would come on the set. She'd come occasionally and sometimes bring friends or family, and they'd be standing in the background, just quiet as mice, just like watching and everything. And it always dawned on me that every person on that soundstage is there because of this woman, okay, because of her vision, because of a creative talent. Everybody's there, but she literally would be somebody that could blend into the woodwork there. You wouldn't even know she was there. But she also, in those scenes that I had with her, I loved them because she was telling me these beautiful stories, and she's just a fantastic storyteller. She was born for that. And she's a little touch of magic, you know, that was just in these scenes with her, and I just will always cherish the memory of that I have.
Really, truly the legacy of this show. It's all Agnes, really. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So having said all that about, there's no real closure for the fans and such, some people asking here, and I've asked the others, if in this day and age with the right people involved, would you be on board for coming back to the show if there was a reboot? And I'm imagining it as a primetime weekly drama.
I mean, absolutely. I would love the opportunity to play David Hayward again, and I'd love to work with the other actors on the show again and the people that were involved creatively on the show. I would do that in a heartbeat. I would love to do that. And, it really was a family there, having worked with all these people for so many years. And everybody brought their own talents to the show, and it just really enhanced the level, the quality of the show. And if it was an opportunity to redo it again, in a heartbeat. If I was available, I'd be there immediately. I'd be happy to do it.
Lots of people will be happy to hear that. And you mentioned the family that's there, seeing lots of questions, and we have here specifically from Peach Blossom 7, maybe also someone from Georgia. For Vincent, my dad and I watched AMC together for years and miss it. Do you keep in touch with any of your AMC co-stars? Yeah, who do you keep in touch with these days?
I do occasionally. I mean, as the years have gone on, the times that we communicate have spread out. I talked to Bobby Eakes a short while ago. I love her. We used to spend time together, especially when we were in New York, and we even came out here in Palm Springs. That's where she was living at the time. She has since moved. Jacob Young, we used to do things together as well. I used to do stuff with Jacob and also James Mitchell. We talked about that the other day. We took him to go see a Broadway play. It was Doubt, actually, was the name of the play at the time. He came movie with Meryl Streep. And so we saw the Broadway production of that. I love James. Walt Willey, I produced a cabaret show years ago that I brought on Walt Willey and also Bobby Eakes. Jacob was supposed to do it, but then we were doing B.B. King's in New York, and it was the same day of Hurricane Sandy. He couldn't fly in, so we had to modify that. But we did also a Turning Stone Casino, upstate New York. So those are people that I did spend time with after the show. But, as I said, as the years have gone on, we've all gone on to do our own separate things. So it's nice to have a reunion now. I did one the other day with a few of the people that were on the show for another platform. And it was great to see them. Aiden Turner, I'm going to be actually in Atlanta probably, I think, tomorrow. I'll be there for a few days, and I may be able to get in touch with him. We talked about maybe connecting. That would be great to sit down and have a beer with him. So, yeah,
that's what a lot of people said. It's a little tough to connect because everybody's kind of even moved in different parts of the country and stuff. So, yes, certainly understand that. But fortunately, we have social media, and we're so glad you were able to join us here today. I want to remind everyone that All My Children cast for this reunion has chosen to support Feeding America, and you guys can, if you're able to make a donation, you can do that at ew.com/allmychildrenreunion. We greatly appreciate that, of course, as does Feeding America. Vincent, thank you so much for joining us on here today. Yeah, thank you to all the fans for the questions and for all of you joining us here to watch.
Thank you so much. I really had a great time. Goodbye, everybody. Bye now.
All right, take care. Thanks. Bye.